Hi, mystery readers. I'm Alexandra Amor. This is It's a Mystery Podcast, and I'm here today with Judith Arnold. Hi, Judith.
Hi, Alexandra.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well also. So let me just introduce our listeners to you. USA Today best-selling author Judith Arnold knew she wanted to be a writer by the time she was 4. She loved making up stories, not exactly the same thing as lying, and enjoying the adventures of her fictional characters. With more than 85 published novels to her name, she's been able to live her dream. Most of Judith's books are in the romance genre, but today we're here to talk about her Lainey Lovett mysteries. And so let's begin then with talking about Lainey. So she is a sort of close to 50 mom. She's a widow as well. And the thing that intrigued me about these books was that she just seemed like such a sort of an independent and different character, like being middle-aged. That really intrigued me because we almost often think of amateur sleuths, especially in cozy mysteries, as being quite young, like 20s or 30s, or, the Jessica Fletcher's, Miss Marple kind of era. So tell us a bit about Lainey and how she came into your life.
Well, Lainey actually is based on the fourth grade teacher my younger son had,
Oh,
who
wow.
was a phenomenal teacher. She was widowed actually a few years after he had her, but she had two kids and was a soccer fanatic. Um, I when I she and she she's a just I mean he's a long way past his fourth grade experience, but I just thought she was a terrific lady, and she was always kind of burbling in the back of my head. And when I decided it was time to write mysteries, I said, they always say, write what you know. And I mean, the town of Rockford, where she teaches, is based on the town I live in. If you knew my town, you'd recognize that El Camino is actually Acapulco's, and and the old Rockford Inn is actually the old Wayside Inn. It's not image for image identical, but I write what you know. It just made it a lot easier for me to create the world of Lainey Lovett. Um, and I mean, obviously she's not exactly the same as my son's teacher either, but I just love that woman's energy and her embrace of her profession and her sharp mind. And I figured, why does a cozy mystery sleuth have to be an old lady with a cardigan and a cat? There are other things too. So that's where she just said, write, put me in your book. So I said, okay.
And does she know? Are you still in touch with that teacher?
No, I have mentioned her to a few people. She's retired, long retired now, and as it turns out, my next door neighbor was a good friend of her daughter's. So I said, make sure she knows this, and I hope she does. I hope she sees it as the huge compliment I mean it to be.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so you mentioned the switch to mysteries from romance. Why did you do that? Why choose to write mysteries?
Well, I've enjoyed reading mysteries. I mean, I loved Murder She Wrote, even though, of course, I would never set foot in Cabot Cove, because if you do, you will die. It's the murder capital of the world. Um, but I love mysteries that are funny. I know it as that we can laugh at the murder, and they're not too grisly, they're not dark, they don't leave you. I mean, I enjoy that. I love reading Dennis Lehane and Laura Lippman books, which are very dark, but um, I don't write very dark for the most part. And I like comedy. The world needs laughter. And actually, I had read I don't know if I should say a bad thing about an author. I have been a huge, huge fan of Susan Isaac's books for years, but her last couple of books I thought were a little bit weary and not as sharp as her earlier books. I mean, I have a shrine practically on my bookshelf for after all these years, and some of her other wonderful, wonderful mysteries. But I was getting a little tired of writing romances, and a little. I mean, I've written, actually it's more than 100 now. I have written a lot of them, and I said I have to try something else. I need to do something different. To make the leap to mysteries was this was big for me because mysteries have to have plots, you know. Romances, you really can fake it without plotting too much. The plot's built into the whole concept of the romance, but suddenly I had to figure out at a rather late stage in my career how to write a plot. But I had so much fun writing the first book, and it really sort of wrote itself, and I was sort of stunned after I finished it and read it and said, wow, did I do that? And then I said, well, I got to make this a series. You know, I love Lainey Lovett, and I guess Rockford will be the new murder capital of the world. Although I managed in the third book, I took the murder out of Rockford, set it in a different town, so the people were free from death and despair for one book there. I just I realized it's a stretch for me. It's a challenge. They're harder for me to write than the romances because I still write romances too. I mean, after I wrote the first Lainey Lovett book, I went back and wrote some more romances, and then wrote the second Lainey Lovett book, and I go back and forth now. But it's good exercise. You know, it stretches my mind, and I love being in this world with Lainey and her friends, and creating a little havoc, you know, creating a little death. I think one of the things that can make a mystery funny is that I always try to make sure that the victim is not somebody who's beloved. It's got to be somebody who people don't like that much, and then we can sort of say, "Oh, good riddance." You know? So, yeah, stay on my good side, or you could be the next victim in my next book. So.
Exactly. I think there are T-shirts like that for mystery writers. You know, yeah, be nice to me, or you'll end up dead in my next book.
Exactly.
And so, when you made that switch and you were having to write more plot-heavy books, then as mysteries are, how did you teach yourself to do that? Did you read books about how to write mysteries, or what happened there?
No, I didn't really. I mean, I've been reading mysteries on and off through my life, and. Writing is just something I do. It's you know, I guess it would be like telling a jogger to just change his technique a little bit but still keep running on the road. So it wasn't a huge leap. I figured it out as I went along, you know, and read other people's mysteries also to kind of say, okay, that's how you pace this or whatever. But you know, it's like, for instance, I don't always know at the beginning of the book who the murderer is. You know, I know who the victim is because the victim is usually dead by the end of chapter 1, but it takes a while for me to figure out who the murderer is, and then I frequently have to go back and redo everything at the beginning to make sure I'm not cheating the reader. But I sort of just, you know, stumble along and slog along and hope it'll all come out okay in the end, and so far I've figured it out, I guess.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I was reading some of the reviews for the Lainey Lovett mysteries, and one of the things that kept popping up was people kept saying they wanted Lainey to be their best friend. Like they.
Well, that's yeah.
They like.
She's yeah.
Yeah, they liked her so much. They you know, yeah, they wanted her to be their best friend, and they say she feels like a real person to them.
Well, that's wonderful. That's great to hear. You know, because I think when you're writing, especially when you're writing an amateur sleuth, you want her to stay believable. You know, when you have an amateur sleuth who can suddenly, you know, figure out bizarre things that somebody else would have to have gone through, you know, detective training at the police academy or the FBI to know. Then you start wondering, really is that an amateur sleuth? So, you know, keeping her real in that sense, keeping her knowing what you or I would know if we stumbled onto a murder.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what they're relating to.
Yeah,
But
that could be.
She's a nice. She's got a good sense of humor, and you know, she's very grounded. So.
And a good group of friends. I understand the Rockettes on her, which is her soccer team.
Yes, she has a few very close friends on the Rockettes. In fact, the fourth Lainey Lovett book, which I'm just doing the final edits on right now, one of her Rockettes friends, Angie, gets her involved in solving a mystery at a senior citizens residence in town where Angie's aunt lives. So the friends are good friends, but they also get her a little bit in trouble sometimes too. But yeah, I think that's another reason that readers respond to her that way. She's got some really good girlfriends, and um, their friendship is very, very important to her, and she's a good friend to them. So
Yeah. And do you find then that I don't know how to phrase this quite right, but sort of use a different part of your brain when you're writing mystery versus romance? Does it feel different? Do you go to a different location when you're writing mysteries?
no, I think it's pretty much the same. There are occasions where I'll do something in one of my Lainey Lovett mysteries where I think, oh no, no, I really can't do that here. I mean, my romances are pretty sexy, and I know, Lainey gets to have sex in these books, and which is, I've been told you're not supposed to do in cozies. So I'm not sure they're specifically cozies. I'll tell this so that any readers who don't want sex in their mysteries can avoid these books. But the sex is way toned down compared to what I have in my romances. On the other hand, what I can let Lainey do that I don't do in the romances is she's got two boyfriends. A little Stephanie Plum thing going on there, I guess you could say, because Janet Ivanovich pulled it off with Stephanie Plum. And I'm not saying which of her boyfriends is better. She's closer with one than with the other. The other one doesn't even appear till book 2. But she you can do that's kind of a no-no in a traditional romance. Have I mean, you can have an ex-boyfriend and a new boyfriend, but not two at the same time. So yeah, but I do have to tone down the heat level a bit in these books. When I'll say to myself, wait, this isn't a romance. Let's close the bedroom door now. Thank you.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And so you've said you're just finishing up the 4th one, and so you plan to continue with the series then?
oh, I do. I like it a lot. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but a lot of fun. So yes, Kick the Bucket is all the books have the word kick in the title, so it's still kicking. Drop. I brought my paperback editions down with me so I could refresh my memory. Drop Kick and Kick Back, and the 4th one is Kick the Bucket. So because of her soccer playing, and she uses her soccer skills to save her neck whenever she gets into big trouble in each of the books too. So being able to, yeah, it's important.
Oh, okay.
How to
So
kick.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when she's sort of dealing with the bad guy, as it were.
Right, and yes, in one book she has to head the guy.
Yeah.
In one book, she finds a stray soccer ball and kicks it at the person who's attacking her. So in Kick the Bucket, there's some really fancy footwork from her dribbling practices. So I should emphasize for readers who haven't read these books, she's not the Rockettes are like an amateur community team. She's not a professional soccer player. She's a school teacher. But she loves playing soccer, and it's a town recreation team. My town has all kinds of recreation teams for adults. I am not an athlete myself. I admire athletes. I am a soccer mom. I have spent many, many hours on the sidelines watching soccer games. My husband coached soccer games. But that's my knowledge. And I played soccer when I was a kid too, but this is a recreation team, and in my town, the adults who get on these recreation teams are really passionate about their teams. So,
And
that's
yeah, and Lainey is as well, I'm assuming, really passionate about her soccer. It seems to be quite a central part of her life.
yes, it is. She basically, I describe her as having three passions in her life: her children, her teaching, and her soccer team. And in that order, I would say, is but the soccer team, part of the soccer team, of course, those are her closest friends too. So it's the friendship as much as the sport that fulfills her.
Yes, yeah. And as we mentioned earlier, the thing that I really liked or was drawn to her about is that she's middle-aged. And I wondered if you could talk about any specific challenges that she might be experiencing in middle age that kind of increase the problems that she's having in addition to the mysteries that are going on and that kind of thing. I mean, she's dating, obviously, so that's one issue.
Well, she's in the first book and Still Kicking, that is when she first starts dating. It's 2 years after her husband has died is when that book is open, and she has not dated until then. But one of the kind of, it's not a major issue for her. Well, for her it's a major issue. It doesn't seem like a major issue to most of us, but there is an informal age limit for the Rockettes. When you are 50, you are supposed to move up to the senior team, and she doesn't want to play on the senior team. So being in her mid 40s, this is a pressing concern of hers. Is she going to get aged out of the Rockettes? But other than that, I think she exemplifies the best of middle age in that she is active, she's busy, she's not obsessed with her age. She in the first book there is a kind of a running subtext about her age. I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying, at the beginning of the book she hasn't dated in 2 years. She's just kind of coming out of 2-year mourning. She had a wonderful marriage. Her friends refer to her late husband as Saint Roger because he was just perfect. But she does, among the continuing characters in the book are her in-laws, who still meddle in her life all the time, and so then they are very funny, interesting characters. But she at the beginning of the book, she's kind of feeling a little dowdy and middle-aged, tired, and at the end of the book, she walks into the salon and says, "Do something with these gray hairs." She's feeling rejuvenated now. She's solved a mystery. She's found a boyfriend, and it's time to do something with the gray hairs. And I think that a lot of women who are not really, they don't have the time or the energy or the interest in obsessing about their age, but you get to a point, you just sort of look and you say, all right, time to do something with those gray hairs. I for years I would ask my husband, should I do something yet? Should I do something yet? He said, no, you look fine. And then one day, I guess I was standing in really bright sunlight, and he said, it's time. So I went into a salon and said, okay, do something. But for the most part, middle age is fun. It's you don't have to worry about all the stuff you worry about in your 20s and 30s, and you're not too old to enjoy life, and middle age is a great place to be. And again, she has lots of energy and lots to live for, and her kids are there. Her in the books, her daughter has graduated from college, but what's it called, boomeranged back home because she was underemployed and not making enough money, and so she's living at home, and her son is still in college. But she keeps thinking, well, it's kind of nice when the house is empty, but then when her kids are gone, she misses them, and then they come back, and she thinks, oh gosh, now I have to buy tons of groceries, especially for her son. Both my sons were like this, they're like the 17-year locusts,
Yeah.
They haven't eaten in 17 years, and they just absorb everything edible in sight. I'm in one scene, Lanie is worrying about buying food for her son. He's visiting for the summer break, and she thinks, this is in the book I'm currently working on, she thinks if I don't come home with the groceries soon, I'm going to find him gnawing on a table leg, But so her relationship with her kids is in a very transitional phase, which is also a fascinating time in life. Your kids, they're still your babies, but they're also adults, and she's dealing with the thought that her children are having sex, and are they having sex in her house, and should she have sex in her house while her kids are there? So it creates all kinds of interesting dynamics. It's a fun. As a writer, it gives me a lot to work with. I'll put it that way.
Yes, I was going to say she sounds like she has a complex life, and I love that about a main character in a mystery novel.
Yeah, yeah. In some ways, I tend to think of these books, they are mysteries, definitely, but they're also women's fiction in a way because
Mm.
they are about they're about a middle-aged woman whose life is in transition and who's figuring out, what she wants to do when she grows up, and so a lot of the pleasures of women's fiction, which I also love to read, are in these books too. So.
Right. And you mentioned how Lainey was sort of loosely based on this teacher that your son had, and that the town that she's in is loosely based on the town where you are. So, do any of the plot points, can you, without giving yourself away at all, do any of the plot points come from real events in your town?
Uh, Well, no, not real events. But things that could happen in my town. There is actually in the first book, and Still Kicking, a deer shows up very fortuitously in one scene, and my town is still semi-rural, and sometimes when I'm out on a jog, suddenly a deer will bolt across the road, and I'll quick grab my phone, hoping to get a picture, but they are faster than I am. I've never been able to capture one in a picture. Um, the first book, part of the plot has to do with well, the murder victim is a guy who builds McMansions, these huge, huge subdivisions of big, big, opulent houses, and there's some concern in the town, if he's tearing up some old forest to put in a subdivision, and a bunch of environmentalists come in, and they're protesting, and when he turns up dead, of course, people are wondering if the environmentalists, people for the protection of the planet, the PPP, um, but so that has never specifically happened in my town, but there have been times when a new subdivision goes up, and we all go, and actually our town lately has been buying old farms. The land here is worth more than a farmer can get out of a crop. So when farmers are ready to retire, they will frequently sell them to developers, because a developer can throw up, $10 million houses there. We're close to Boston is the problem, and
Yeah.
Boston is a very expensive city. Um, so our town, we set up a fund, and we will try to the town will buy some of these farms to preserve them and preserve the open land. It's a conservation fund. So it again, we've never had the kind of strife I describe in the book, but it's there. It's based on some concerns in town. Oh no, not another subdivision of big ugly houses. So. Um, but no, nothing. And actually, in the fourth book, Kick the Bucket is based a little on the assisted living residence, independent living residence where my mother lives. Not in this town, but in a few towns over. I can't wait for her to read the book, because she's going to say, I know that room. I know that. Then she's going to yell at me because the director I created for that place is nothing like her director. Oh no, Ellen is much nicer than that character Brenda you wrote. And I'll have to explain to her that this is fiction and we are allowed to make things up. But so I do borrow, and I will say that Acapulco is our Mexican restaurant, which El Camino is the Mexican restaurant that Lainey and her friends go to after soccer practice to drink margaritas. And uh, I think people might recognize the electric jalapenos hanging from the ceiling. That I don't know if Acapulco still has them. They had them for years though, and I always said I have to put electric jalapenos in at some point. So, not specific incidents. Fortunately, we do not have a high murder rate here in town. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. I used to live in Vancouver, British Columbia, and there was a restaurant about half a block from me that was called El Caminos. Just,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Yes.
perfect.
Good.
They had those little tiny tacos, they're just this big, and you get like three of them. Oh, they were so good.
Yes.
Well, this has been amazing, Judith. Thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been great talking about your unique, well, I think they're really unique, soccer mysteries. They're awesome. So why don't you let our listeners know where they can find out more about you and your books?
Well, they can come to my website, www.juditharnold.com. And they can sign up for my newsletter. I don't send out tons of newsletters, but when I have a new book coming out, or news to share, please sign up for the newsletter, and that way you'll know when the next Lainey Lovett book or my next romance is coming out too. I'm on Facebook, Judith Arnold, I think Judith_Arnold, author, something like that. Just do a search for Judith Arnold on Facebook, and you'll find many Judith Arnolds, but I'm Judith Arnold, author.
Okay.
So that, and or if you subscribe to BookBub, you can follow me on BookBub too.
Right.
And that's a great way, because they always will send you an announcement when I have a new book out. If you don't want the newsletter, you can count on BookBub to pass the word along.
So that you know.
So,
and when can we expect the fourth Lainey Lovett mystery?
I am hoping it will be out by the end of October.
Okay.
In the digital version, the paperback will probably take a little longer, because I work with a publisher. A publisher handles my paperback rights, but I publish the digital directly. So that usually comes out first. But possibly mid-October. It's going to depend on when I can get the revisions finished and the formatting done. But I've got a gorgeous cover for it, though, and that's already done. And it's going to be another very fun book.
Oh, great. Fantastic. Well, thanks again for chatting with me today. Take care.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.